kind of have a little bit of a theory that emotional pain is somewhat of a built-in safeguard defense mechanism as well, to keep us alive emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. So if I'm in a relationship and I think about stealing money from you, and guilt comes up, and shame and anxiety, that negative emotion is enough of a barometer for me to say that doesn't feel right, and I need to go do something else that feels better, and life goes on. What happens regarding this distortion of emotions for drug users, teenage drug users, is that that barometer is gone. That sense of guilt, shame, anxiety is gone. So they're not connected to what they're doing as a negative thing in their life. And then when they get in trouble for it, and you're trying to point out, can't you see what you're doing? They're not connected to that emotional experience of, wow, I need to really turn around and change my life. They're split off from their emotional experience as a result of the substance abuse. And it really fuels that I don't care attitude. Finally then, chemical dependency, or a drug addiction, alcoholism, kind of all means the same thing. Everything that I just mentioned, but there's more of an obsession, more of a mental preoccupation and obsession to go out and get the drug. They're definitely doing it despite consequences, and at some point they might try to set limits on their use and go beyond the limits, and that's loss of control. So they'll say, all right, I need to step it up, I need to do better, I need to focus on school, I'm only going to smoke weed on the weekend now, or I'm only going to take OxyContin once a month, and then the next thing they're doing it every week, and then weekdays, you know, they cross their own boundaries, they cross their own line. Another thing, so I was talking earlier about juvenile onset drug abuse versus adult, you know, and how many of us get training or somehow get education about addiction from an adult model. Well, here are some distinctions between adolescents versus adults. And one is that young people can progress, the stages that I just talked about, can progress to addiction very rapidly compared to adults. So if you take a 15-year-old who's starting to use drugs, they could experience the symptoms of addiction in 6 months, a year, 18 months. It's a very rapid thing. If us in the audience started using drugs today, it might take 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. It's going to be a much slower progression. Some risk factors for teens and adults in the research today in terms of who's at risk for addiction. Family histories. If you come from a genetic family history, if you as a parent are in recovery or practicing drug addiction or alcoholism or in recovery for it, or you have a family history, then your child could actually inherit a gene to be predisposed to having addiction as well. The gene doesn't mean that they have this gene, hit the teenage years, and then go, I got to go find some drugs. It just means once they try it, they might like it a lot more than the other kids who tried it that night as well. Adolescent brains and bodies aren't fully developed using drugs at an early age. Here's what scares me neurologically. So I already talked about kind of what concerns me about the emotional and psychological development for kids using. Neurologically, our brains, and I'll try to make this simple, our brains from birth to our early 20s are really growing, organically growing, and neurologically hardwiring, networking, and learning from the environment and the world we live in, writing a blueprint, writing a program that when we're in adults, the brain says, here's the information I gathered for 20 years, take this program and run with it now for the rest of your life. It could be changed a little bit with time, but that's what's taking place. This brain is still growing, you know. During that time, for the point of this, the brain is trying to regulate the production of neurotransmitters. You've heard of serotonin. That's the neurotransmitter that keeps you from being depressed. It's the one talked about the most in the news. It's the neurotransmitter that's targeted with Paxil, Zoloft, other antidepressants. And there's other neurotransmitters, GABA, which helps us to deal with stress and anxiety. There's norepinephrine, which gives us energy, arousal, and drive. When kids use drugs while their brain is still growing and developing, the brain stops its own production of those neurotransmitters because it believes that they're coming from ecstasy pills and beer pong on the weekend. So it stops its production of serotonin. It stops its production of GABA. And over a long period of time with this taking place, the brain has now killed off neuroreceptors. It's not firing neurotransmitters. What does that mean? It means that if your kid now stops using drugs, the brain doesn't just start working as normal again. There's now missing chemistry. There's now a missing link. And now they're using drugs not just to be high, but to take the edge off, just to feel normal. And that missing link in brain chemistry is the fuel, biologically, to the fire of obsession. The obsession to use, the compulsion to use, the behavior to use. Here's an analogy that you might be able to relate to in terms of missing brain chemistry and body chemistry. If you guys haven't eaten any food in a week, and I'm up here giving this lecture eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, what is your experience going to be? Back to the symptoms of addiction, preoccupation and obsession. How do I get John Daly's sandwich? You know, guys are sizing me up, I could take them. You know, I'll grab them, you grab the sandwich, we'll eat it real quick. And what happens then after you eat that sandwich? Your brain and body chemistry goes back to normal. The obsession goes away, the compulsion goes away. And now you're stuck with you. Oh, I thought I was a non-violent Christian person, and I just acted in violence against John Daly and stole his sandwich. Now I have a little guilt and I have a little bit of shame, and my self-esteem has just been affected by that. And then as time goes on, you find yourself hungry again, and me babbling away with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you act out that same behavior. And now, ultimately, in terms of your psychological development and experience in your relationship to yourself, you're really convinced that you're not a good person. So now that's happening to young people. They don't mean to rip you off. They don't mean to skip school. They don't mean to get in trouble with the law. They're good kids with a bad illness. And that core character structure of who they are as good people is still inside of them. And then there's that, and you know, we just have to bring it, get rid of the drugs, this defense mechanism, and bring that out a little bit more. The other thing that fuels the progression to be more rapid for young people is that they will use a combination of drugs. Adults with drug use issues primarily have one drug of choice. Might be alcohol, might be pills, who knows what it is. Young people are going to have the drug that they like, but their drug use history can consist of 15 different drugs in the last 2 years. So a client of mine will tell me, yeah, you know, I like smoking weed pretty often, 5 times a week. Maybe I'll drink every other weekend. Yeah, I've tried mushrooms. Yeah, I've done Vicodin about 6 or 7 times. Nitrous oxide, yeah, I've done that too many times to count. Yeah, I tried salvia, you know, ecstasy a couple times. Yeah, you know, and the list is just long. The problem is that a combination of drugs affects a combination of neurotransmitters during that developmental time that I just spoke about. And then finally, in the adolescence environment, the purpose of use is for intoxication. Adults, we have permission for social use. Social use is defined as drinking alcohol, not cocaine, drinking alcohol without getting hammered. You know, you have a glass of wine with dinner, you have a beer watching the game. It's a very small adjunct to a bigger social situation that's taking place. That's social use. Some of you might relate to misuse, abuse, or addiction, but I'm just talking about social use. Kids don't have social use. Social use for kids is, my parents are gone, bring over everything you have, and we're getting hammered tonight. That's their definition of social use. Something different than adults. Finally, stimulant drugs, methamphetamine, ecstasy, cocaine, accelerate the progression from experimentation to addiction to be much more rapid. So I wanted to share some interesting pictures with you. These are pictures are taken from brainplace.com, Dr. Amen's clinic in Fairfield, brainplace.com. This is SPECT imaging. This is metabolism in the brain. The more color, the more round and smooth is, the healthier the brain is, the more normal it is. These are normal brains. It's about as smooth and colorful as it gets. To the left would be the top of the brain, to the right would be the front, and here would be the bottom. And here would be the bottom of the brain of a kid who started smoking weed at age 15 and smokes marijuana 4 times a week. Interestingly enough, again, marijuana, a big drug, a drug that's very much minimized by parents and even minimized by professionals. You know, I don't get a lot of referrals from pediatricians who say, oh, this kid's smoking marijuana. I get referrals from pediatricians who say, hey, this kid's using OxyContin.